Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. The top stories today. Amid days of protests over the death of George Floyd, Attorney General William Barr says authorities have made over 50 arrests related to rioting. Health officials worry that as people gather to seek justice for George Floyd, there's a risk we'll see new outbreaks of the CCP virus outbreak. Officials are warning we're not out of the woods yet. Mike Pompeo praises new Nasdaq rules for foreign companies listing on the exchange. He says it will help level the playing field for everyone and prevent fraud. And Iran released a U.S. Navy veteran yesterday after detaining him for nearly 2 years. President Trump says it shows deals with Iran are possible. A report from the U.S. Department of Labor shows economic downturn caused by the virus pandemic is bottoming out.
And we saved millions of lives, and now we're opening, and we're opening with a bang. And we've been talking about the V. This is better than a V. This is a rocket ship.
Today, the Labor Department announced U.S. unemployment rate unexpectedly fell in May. According to the monthly employment report, the jobless rate dropped to just over 13% last month, down from close to 15% in April. Non-farm payrolls also rose by more than 2.5 million jobs. That's after a record plunge of over 20 million in April. The surprisingly good jobs and unemployment figures give weight to hopes of a faster economic rebound from the pandemic. The Attorney General says 51 arrests were made for crimes related to rioting over the past few days. The AG acknowledged that many people attending the demonstrations were there to seek justice for George Floyd, the man killed in police custody on May 25th. But he says others were there to hijack the protests and cause trouble.
Attorney General William Barr said on Thursday authorities have made 51 arrests for federal crimes related to violent rioting in recent days. He said while many came out to join calls for justice, others hijacked the protests to engage in lawlessness, naming opportunistic looters and extremist agitators as the main actors. The Department of Justice has evidence that extremist organization Antifa and other similar groups instigated and participated in violent activity. Barr said these groups have their own separate and violent agenda. FBI Director Christopher Wray at the same press conference said that individuals in these groups intend to sow discord and upheaval as opposed to pursue justice. The FBI has directed 200 joint terrorism task forces from across the country to help law enforcement with apprehending and charging violent agitators. Speaking in the Department of Justice, Barr said the building blocks of a free society depend on the rule of law. Barr noted the inscription in Latin above the entrance, which reads, "Everything is created by law and order," saying it's an ancient principle that still holds true. Barr noted that some groups don't have a particular ideology other than anarchy, and some want to bring about a civil war, such as a Boogaloo group. The Attorney General also addressed criticisms over President Trump's visit to the historic St. John's Church near the White House earlier in the week. Barr said law enforcement officers' plans to move the boundary back 1 block from the White House were already underway before the president announced he would walk to the Church of the Presidents.
I did not know that he was going to do that until later in the day, after our plans were well underway to move the perimeter. So there was no correlation between.
But due to delays, hopes to complete the move before protesters assembled were not successful. Demonstrations in the area had escalated beyond peaceful protests in the preceding 4 days, causing 51 USPP officers to suffer injuries, 11 of whom were taken to the hospital and released, and 3 of them were admitted.
And the Texas Department of Public Safety is investigating what role the anarchist group Antifa has played in the protests. NTD's Kevin Hogan spoke with a naval intelligence officer who studied the group in detail. He gives his take on what Antifa is and what it's trying to achieve.
Violent riots have ravaged major cities in the U.S. over the last several days. The Texas Department of Public Safety is investigating links between the extremist group Antifa and the looting of a Target store in Austin. The agency's director said Antifa coordinated the looting over the internet. Jack Posobiec is a veteran naval intel officer, a political commentator, and has researched Antifa extensively. Antifa members have physically attacked Posobiec and have disrupted his events. He explains the group's ideology.
They are promoting an ideology of insurrection, an ideology of revolution. They are anti-government extremists. and their goal is the destabilization of countries. Of course,
He says their symbol consists of two flags.
The black flag of anarchy with the red flag of communism.
Peaceful protests over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis police custody have often morphed into lawless free-for-alls. AG Barr suspects Antifa is driving the violence. Project Veritas infiltrated Antifa and found the group doesn't hesitate to incite violence and uses a tactic called Black Bloc.
Black Bloc is a group of individuals who are moving in concert, so a group, and they're all masked.
A commentary on the Antifa website It's Going Down paints a clear picture of their goal, which is the destruction of the father figure, government, democracy, and capitalism by using violence, vandalism, robbery, and wiping out the values of hard work, self-discipline, honesty, and ambition.
They are not seeking unity. They are seeking destruction. They are seeking violence. They are seeking to pit citizen against citizen and are seeking the ultimate subversion of the rule of law in America.
Posobiec suspects we may see the feds infiltrate these extremist groups like they did during the planning of the violent inauguration protests in 2016. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
And as tens of thousands of Americans turn out to demonstrate, medical experts are worried we may see new outbreaks of the CCP virus. But they say it may be 3 to 4 weeks before we know for sure.
Uncertainty about venturing out during the pandemic has been seemingly cast aside as thousands go out to protest following the death of George Floyd. But despite the sudden shift after weeks of social distancing, the CCP virus is still spreading, and officials fear the numbers will rise following the protests. They're now urging those taking part to get tested. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams says that based on the way the disease spreads, there is every reason to expect that we will see new clusters and potentially new outbreaks. Some factors, like the protests being held outside, could reduce virus spread.
We're very concerned that our public health message isn't resonating. We continue to try to figure out how to penetrate the message with different groups.
Maria von Kerkhove, a disease epidemiologist at the World Health Organization, says the presence of the virus over time may lead some people to become lax with social distancing, but that we must remain strong and vigilant. Health officials have warned that the virus may surge in tandem with the flu this fall and winter.
Mike Pompeo is applauding the Nasdaq stock exchange for new rules that make foreign companies listed on the exchange play by the same accounting rules as American companies. The changes are believed to be targeting Chinese listings. They currently refuse to show their audit books to U.S. regulators, calling them state secrets. Pompeo says the new rules will help protect investors from fraud.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Thursday applauded a move by Nasdaq to tighten listing rules for Chinese companies. In a statement, Pompeo said this helps to level the playing field between American businesses and investors and the rest of the world, particularly China. Pompeo noted a pattern of fraudulent accounting practices in China-based companies. A foreign policy presidential memorandum issued on Thursday labeled these practices by Chinese companies as both wrong and dangerous for investors. It stated that investors trust United States stock exchanges for their robust disclosure requirements and clear and effective regulation, and cautioned China's actions to thwart our transparency laws raise significant risk for investors. Nasdaq recently proposed new rules on initial public offerings that would make it harder for some Chinese companies to debut on the stock exchange. The new rules include greater scrutiny of the audit firms that review the accounts of overseas companies it lists. Following a recent law, the Chinese regime refuses to allow audit firms registered with a U.S. independent oversight body to assess Chinese companies without prior consent. The June 4th memo encourages firm orderly action to end the Chinese practice of flouting American transparency requirements and ensure that laws for companies listed on the United States stock exchanges are fully enforced.
Michael Pack is the new CEO of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which oversees state media like Voice of America. Pack, a conservative, was nominated by President Trump, but he faced opposition from Democrats who feared his political leanings would erode the agency's independence.
If not, the yeas are 50.
The vote of 53 to 38. After 2 years of opposition from Senate Democrats, the Republican-led Senate voted almost entirely along party lines. Michael Pack will serve for 3 years as the U.S. AGM's first Senate-confirmed CEO. The US AGM oversees VOA and its sister outlets, including Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, and the Cuba-oriented Radio and Television Marti. The Trump administration in April accused VOA of amplifying Chinese Communist Party propaganda. At the time, the White House cited 2 examples where VOA had allegedly promoted CCP propaganda about the spread of the CCP virus. Democrats on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee tried unsuccessfully 8 times to postpone consideration for the nomination of Pak 2 weeks ago. At his nomination hearing, Pak said he would ensure journalistic independence. VOA was created during World War II with the goal of airing unbiased news to combat Nazi propaganda and promote American values to the world.
A Navy veteran who was jailed in Iran for almost 2 years is now free. The president thanked the Swiss government for flying White home and said he'll keep fighting for Americans trapped overseas.
Iran released a U.S. Navy veteran Thursday after detaining him for nearly 2 years. President Trump announced the news on Twitter. He wrote, "I am happy to announce that Navy veteran Michael White, who has been detained by Iran for 683 days, is on a Swiss plane that just left Iranian airspace. We expect him to be home with his family in America very soon. I will never stop working to secure the release of all Americans held hostage overseas. Thank you, Switzerland, for your great assistance." A White House spokesperson says the president is focused on getting more Americans back.
And he's going to keep at it. He wants to remain focused on making sure that all of the Americans at home and abroad are safe, but also those who are detained in any way get back to American soil as safely and as soon as possible.
U.S. officials say White's release was part of a prisoner deal. In exchange, an Iranian-American doctor can visit his family in Iran before coming back to the U.S. White was detained in July 2018 after going to Iran to meet with an Iranian girlfriend. He was sentenced to 10 years in 2019 for insulting Iran's supreme leader and posting on social media. White was hospitalized in March with virus symptoms. He and other prisoners were furloughed after the virus hit Iranian jails. At least 3 other Americans are still detained in Iran.
And coming up, India's Prime Minister accepted President Trump's invitation to join the G7 meeting this year, but the Chinese regime is furious about it. We have the details after the break.
"90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board."
As military tensions rise at the India-China border, a different kind of battle is already happening in cyberspace. A popular new Indian app can detect and remove Chinese software from your device. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the details.
Google has removed a new app from its Play Store, one that seeks out and removes Chinese-made software. Appropriately named Remove China app, it can detect and delete applications made by Chinese developers. Quickly rising in popularity, it clocked in at over 1 million downloads in less than 2 weeks and took the number 2 slot at the Google Play Store's list of top free apps in India. Chinese apps have made a huge splash in India despite rising tensions between the 2 countries. Software analytics company Sensor Tower estimated that social media app TikTok had reached 636 million downloads in India, far more than either Instagram or Snapchat. TikTok is owned by Beijing-based ByteDance. India's current anti-China sentiment stems from an ongoing border dispute and the rampant virus spread in India. According to a local survey institute, 2/3 of India's citizens believe that China should be responsible for the pandemic. That's as Chinese and Indian soldiers have been clashing at their shared border since May. Google removed the app earlier this week from its Play Store, citing a policy that bans Android apps that help delete or disable other apps. But even after the removal, the India-based developer shared a tip on his website. Users can still find the origin of software apps with the help of a quick Google search. It explained that typing app name origin country should do the trick. Now to China. A new Communist Party secretary in Mudanjiang City has been appointed after new virus cases popped up locally almost every day within the last week. At the same time, the new secretary also became the new leader of a group working to combat the pandemic in that city. Local media didn't elaborate on the decision, but as a general rule, if the virus situation in a specific place becomes too overwhelming, local leadership may be replaced. According to local reports, Mudanjiang has discovered 15 asymptomatic cases in the last week alone. But the information available on social media shows the situation could be much worse. Early this week, the city began an initiative to test all of its 2.5 million residents for the CCP virus. The decision came from the city's new authorities.
And India's Prime Minister has accepted President Trump's invitation to this year's G7 summit. Experts are saying by expanding the summit, Trump might be bringing in allies to block China.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi accepted President Trump's invitation to attend this year's G7 meeting in a phone conversation on Tuesday night. As this year's host, Trump has delayed the summit of 7 industrialized democracies to September. He also said he hopes to expand the invitation to 4 more countries: India, Australia, Russia, and South Korea. Modi's office commended Trump in a Tuesday statement for his creative and far-sighted approach, acknowledging the fact that such an expanded forum would be in keeping with the emerging realities of the post-COVID world. The White House said this year's summit will focus on the impact of the virus and the future of China. The Chinese regime's foreign ministry said on Tuesday that any attempt to seek a small circle against China is doomed to fail and is unpopular. According to the Indian Foreign Ministry over the phone, Trump and Modi also talked about the virus pandemic, India-China border tensions, and reforming the World Health Organization. India recently became the chair of the executive board of the WHO, where it may play a crucial role in seeking accountability for China's handling of the virus. India is a traditional American ally and strategic partner in the Indo-Pacific area. This February, Trump paid a 2-day visit to India and was welcomed by an audience of over 100,000, together with Modi, who was re-elected last year.
Namaste, Trump!
Trump has an over 50% personal approval rating in India. The standalone trip was seen as a sign of the converging American and Indian interest to counter the Chinese regime's increasingly aggressive behavior in the Indo-Pacific region. Clashes erupted last month at a disputed India-China border area. Hundreds of troops engaged in hand-to-hand fighting and stone throwing, resulting in minor injuries. Since the conflict began, the Chinese have erected 80 to 100 tents, brought in heavy vehicles and heavy weapons, and have started building bunkers. Aparna Pandey, the director of the Hudson Institute's initiative on the future of India and South Asia, told NTD's sister media, The Epoch Times, that's a typical tactic of China in territorial disputes in Asia. She said China would argue over territory, keep pushing and testing the other side. Then when you can, build permanent bunkers and then sit there. Then again, after a little while, creep forward. She said China's action is an attempt to prevent India from bolstering its side of the border as the world's attention is diverted by the virus pandemic. An Indian media report says that the country has indicated that it would like to offer an alternative to countries to shift businesses to India from China in a post-pandemic world. A Harvard Business Review article also says that India might be the obvious alternative for companies as tensions between the U.S. and China rise. Reporting by Penny Zhou, NTD News.
And on Tuesday, the Indian Defense Minister told media that a significant number of Chinese troops have set up at a disputed area of the India-China border. The minister said the two countries will hold top-level talks on June 6th. And still to come this afternoon, face masks are now compulsory on UK public transport. Britain's smallest coffee shop reopens and Italians are finally allowed to travel inside the country. That and more after the break.
viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
In European news, face masks are now compulsory on public transportation in the United Kingdom, and Britain's smallest coffee shop reopens. Here's NTD UK's Neil Woodrow.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome to NTD UK, bringing you UK and European news. I'm Neil Woodrow. The UK government follows other countries in announcing all passengers using public transport must wear face coverings at all times. Starting June 15th, anyone not wearing one will be refused entry or fined.
And as passenger numbers increase, and we expect this trend to continue, we need to ensure every precaution is taken on buses, trains, aircraft, and on ferries.
Although the measure is compulsory, there are exemptions for very young children, disabled people and those with breathing difficulties. Also, all travellers to the UK will have to self-quarantine for 14 days, including British citizens.
Anyone entering the UK will have to fill a contact form giving details on where they will isolate. Leaving isolation could lead to prosecution or a £1,000 fine, about $1,200.
Travellers from overseas could become a high proportion of the overall number of infections in the UK and therefore increase the spread of the disease.
The plans are being criticised by some in the airline industry who argue it could put travellers off visiting the country altogether. Tourism chiefs are also calling on the government to rethink, as they are facing £37 billion in losses due to the CCP virus, or about $46 billion.
The government said it will review the measures in the last week of June. A coffee shop styled as Britain's smallest has reopened after 10 weeks of lockdown. The Amar Cafe operates out of 2 old red telephone boxes in West London.
The business had only been running for a week before closing under the lockdown, but its owners say it's perfectly positioned to operate under current conditions.
Yeah, it was always going to be takeaway, so maybe it might be better now for us because people would prefer to be outside, sit in the park.
With trade looking like it will pick up, they hope they don't run out of coffee imported from Hernandez' native Colombia.
For now we are okay, but we don't know if this lockdown continues, and it continues in Colombia for much longer. It would affect her.
For now, they are making the most of their situation and trying to keep going.
On to Spain, where they're looking to pass a tax on non-recyclable plastics. If approved, the green tax would collect more than €700 million, or over $800 million per year. Ice cream parlours are one of the many businesses that use a lot of single-use plastics. The government hopes the tax will be an incentive for manufacturers to make things like straws, cutlery and plastic dishes out of other materials.
Plastic manufacturers will have to take care or fund the waste collection and the management of it.
This is one way Spain is trying to meet an EU target of phasing out single-use plastics by 2021. The bill also targets products containing microplastics. The UK has proposed a similar tax that, if passed, would go into effect in April 2022. To Italy, where Italians are free to once again travel inside the country for the first time since lockdown. Other Europeans can also visit Italy without undergoing quarantine.
Rome's main train station, Termini, is busy again, at least busier than it's been for 3 months. People we spoke with supported allowing free movement inside the country as long as people follow the rules.
I have always worked, despite lockdown. I think it is right to allow free movement. It is important to be careful and to be responsible.
However, some were less sure about allowing visitors from other countries.
I would prefer that we waited longer before reopening borders with other countries. I would have preferred it to be more gradual.
Although Italy reopened to European travel on Wednesday, there is still no sign here of the crowds of tourists who would normally be waiting for taxis and buses to take them to their hotels.
Now we move to Belgium, where bars and restaurants will reopen from June 8. But in smaller venues where it's not so easy to socially distance, entrepreneurs have come up with a solution.
Plastic screens are being installed on bar counters and between tables. Restaurant owners hope these will protect customers and staff.
When you can't respect social distancing, which is a crucial element, then these plexiglass panels allow people to be closer to each other while avoiding the virus getting too near you.
Several Belgian companies hit by the lockdown have shifted their activities to providing solutions for the catering industry. Thierry Julliand owns a photo printing and framing company. He now works with a company to make these attractive plastic panels.
Several friends who own restaurants told me about their problems, and there was a click.
The panels cost about $200 each. Julliand's company has already serviced over 50 restaurants in Belgium, plus customers in Switzerland, Luxembourg and France.
Nightclubs are not included in this phase of reopening, but key tourist sites, campgrounds and movie theatres are. That's all from us here in the UK. Till next time, it's back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Neil. And still to come, the quality of Italy's seawater goes up as tourism under lockdown goes down. You can see the pristine waters for yourself after the break. Need some fresh air? Scientists believe they've found the world's cleanest air, but it's pretty far away. They say it's over the Southern Ocean. That's the body of water that surrounds Antarctica. Researchers found the air above that particular ocean remains unchanged by human activity. There's apparently no evidence of particles from burning fossil fuels, crops, fertilizer, or wastewater. Scientists in the study describe the area as truly pristine. And Italy's seawater is also more pristine these days. Results of a nationwide survey show there's been a big improvement in the water quality. Some say it could be related to lockdown measures.
30 million tourists visit Rome each year, but when Italy ordered everyone home on March 10th, the number of visitors to the region dropped significantly. Marco Lupo, General Director of Lazio Region Environmental Agency, said they have seen reduced pollutants compared with the 2 previous years.
We noticed from the first results a noticeable reduction in the quantity of pollutants coming from anthropic influence. I'm talking about pollutants coming from human activities such as nitric nitrogen, total nitrogen, but also phosphorus.
Roberto Archiprete, a marine biologist working for a local fishing cooperative, said the amount of fish unloaded this year increased compared to last year, and it could be related to the blockade on maritime traffic.
We noticed that in April 2020 compared with April 2019, we unloaded more than 60,000 kilograms of fish, while in 2019 we had 52,000.
Coast Guard Admiral Vincenzo Leone, in charge of the Lazio region, says it was appropriate to seize the moment to understand whether the visible effects of eliminating tourism and boating had a real effect on water quality.
The hope is to provide to the institutions and to decision makers information and indications that before it was impossible to give, and hopefully to take more effective action to protect the sea. Because as we often say, there is only one sea, and we must protect it.
Leone says the results of the sea surveys will be published by the Environment Ministry and will help guide future policy.
That's the latest updates for now. Thank you for tuning in. You can catch up again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Paul Graney.